Welcome to Unit 3, Shapes, Clipping Masks, Brushes, and Paths. And we will be utilizing Photoshop for this, although I will also be pausing my video and going into Photopea to create this same activity at the same time. That way, if there are things that are significantly different, then I will show you both. But for things that aren't, I won't make you watch me do it in both programs. So, there is a file folder of images. You can create a new image if you want to. If you decide to create a new image and do this all from scratch yourself, you'll go to File and New, and the settings that we will use will be 800 pixels by 500 pixels, and we're just going to set the resolution to 72. Now, normally we use a higher resolution, but because some students may be working on Chromebooks in Photopea, the lower resolution is a smaller file, and that won't take up as much space and should run faster on your Chromebook. So we're going to use 72, but the quality on 72 is really what we call screen quality, like not print quality. And then a white background. So I have already created this PSD file called skistart.psd. You can download it and just open it and start from here. All I did was create the new document with a white background, and then I went to File, Place, Embedded, and I placed all of these pictures on here. So we have the ski silhouette at the bottom, we have this blue sky down here at the bottom, we have this Olympics picture, and we have the skiing girl. And because we used File Place, they automatically have names. So if you drag them in, so if I would have opened the picture of her and drug it over, it would say layer 1 or whatever. So I kind of like to place them just because when you place them, you don't have to worry about that. You also don't have to worry about color mode issues if you place images. Now, I've already done the same thing. Actually, I started this project in Photopea because Photopea automatically makes them as high as the screen is, or the canvas is, and Photoshop doesn't. So this actually was a little easier to set up initially in Photopea. So here's the same document in Photopea. You see they are all smart objects. Remember, with smart objects, if we're going to erase or do certain things, we would need to rasterize those layers. So when we erase this white background here, we will have to rasterize that specific layer. We shouldn't have to rasterize the rest of these layers though, because we're not going to be doing any editing to those pictures specifically. Okay, so let's hop to it by starting off with the first part of our note sheet, which is dealing with shapes. So I'm going to be turning off certain things for now until we need them. So let's just go ahead and turn off all of these layers so that we're just dealing with the white background layer. We're going to start off by just creating some simple shapes. So you're going to click and hold your rectangle tool, and we're going to choose the ellipse tool. At the top on the properties panel, we want to make sure this is set to draw shapes, because you can also draw paths, and we want to make sure we're drawing a shape that has a color. So let's click on fill and just choose any blue color that you like. Doesn't matter really what color. You can always change it later on. Fill is the inside of a shape. Now we're not going to use a stroke, but let me go ahead and put a stroke on here just to show you what it does. Stroke is the outside of a shape, and we've talked about stroke before because we use that as a layer style. So we can add a stroke as a layer style by hitting the FX button or the EFF in Photopea. But with shapes, you can actually do it when you draw the shape. Now I'm going to not do it on my shape so that we don't have a stroke there. We simply have the shape. Okay, so I've got one shape here. We're going to duplicate the shape. As you recall, we hold down the Alt key when we're on the Move tool to duplicate the shape. But before we do that, let's make this shape see-through. So to change something to make it see-through, we go up to the opacity on the Layers panel. We pull it back. We're going to pull this back to about 50%. Roughly. It can be 49, 53, I don't care. Okay, now let's go ahead and copy it. That way we don't have to change the opacity twice. So hold down the Alt key, point to your circle, click and drag. When you're in Photoshop, you get a black and a white overlapping arrow thing, so you know that you're duplicating. You don't get that in Photopea. They don't give you little cues with your mouse changing in Photopea, so you kind of just have to know what you're doing. Okay, so we've got this. We're just going to kind of have it as sort of a little overlapped deal that's going on here in the corner, like so. We can always move this down later on. And I'll just leave these named ellipse. So we simply drew a shape. And there are built-in shapes, such as the rectangle, the rounded rectangle, the ellipse, which is a circle, the polygon, which is the tool that would allow you to draw polygons. Polygons are things that have sides. So up here at the top where it says 8, if I go to draw a polygon right now, it will draw an 8-sided polygon, or it will draw an 8-pointed star. So let me click here. This is already set on this little gear to star. So if I uncheck it, it will draw a standard polygon, an 8-sided polygon, stop sign. And if I check it, it will draw an 8-point star. So that's kind of your differences there. Okay, so for us, we're going to draw a star. Now again, I don't need this other one. So I'm going to just press delete on my keyboard to get rid of that one. And then for your star, let's go ahead and position your star over here at the intersection of all of these. Again, I don't want this stroke on here, so I'm going to go back and click back on my shape tool so that I can bring this option up here. And I'm going to take off that stroke. And then we'll go ahead and make that star whatever size you want. I am going to use my transform handles here, holding shift and pull from the corner, and then kind of position this where they all meet up. And we will not change the opacity on this star. We'll leave this star solid. Okay, so that's our first setup here. Now let's go look at this in Photo P. I've already done part of it. You can see the circles are basically the same. I modified the opacity, but let's click and hold our rectangle here in Photo P, and we don't have a thing called polygon. It's called parametric shape. I actually like this better in Photo P. When you click it, it has a place for the sides, and then it has a place for polygon or star or arrow or spiral. So we have other options in here. So once again, I'm going to choose star and then draw my star. And again, I don't care how many sides you have on your star. And then we'll put it at the intersection of your lines. Again, don't modify the opacity on your star. So now we are pretty much the same in both. So the cool thing about using shapes is shapes are what we call vector items in Photoshop. They retain the crisp, sharp edges. So if we zoom in a lot on a regular picture, it gets pixely. If we zoom in a lot on shapes, it doesn't. It stays perfect, no matter how large we make them. So we can Control T and make those really big, transform them bigger. If you want to change the shape, you can use what's called the direct selection tool. It's a white arrow. In Photoshop, you have to click and hold this black arrow under the type tool to get to the white arrow. But then you can click on the shape, and if I zoom up really closely, you can see that I can click on the points, and so I could technically move these around a little bit, if I wanted to make it look a little bit different. In Photo P, we have that same option. You can click on your shape. You have to go find where this hides. It's 2 buttons under the type tool. Click and hold for direct select. And then again, same thing, click on it, and then you can grab a hold of the different parts and do whatever you want. This is so much uglier with this other star that I have going on here. Ugh. Okay, that's fine. I'll just kind of open that guy up a little bit. Looks kind of like a flower. Anyway, and there's no check mark or anything that you have to press when you use the direct selection tool in either programs. So, okay, so we use the direct selection tool, that white arrow, to do that. If you wanted to draw a perfect shape, so like a perfect rectangle or a perfect circle, you just simply hold shift. If you don't hold shift, you can make rectangles. If you hold shift, you can only make perfect circles or squares. Okay, so next up, delete that, press delete on my keyboard. Okay, next up, we can use custom shapes. Custom shapes are pretty cool. When you click and hold your rectangle tool, you go to the bottom to the custom shape tool. And then there'll be a little place up here with a drop down. This is going to let you choose the custom shapes that you want. Now this is a little more refined in Photoshop. You can click on the gear that pops up and we have categories. So if I say symbols, it will give me the symbols and it will ask me, do you want to replace your current shapes with this one? And you say okay, and then it replaces them. Or animals, replace, and okay. If you don't replace, it just adds them to the list. They call that appending it to the list. You can also load shapes. And since we don't have the same shapes in Photoshop and Photo P, in the folder I had you to use, you will load a shape from that folder. So I'll show you how to do that in both. In Photoshop, you just click on the gear and you go to load shapes, and then you'll go to the place for those specific shapes. The shape that we're going to use, and I'm at school here on my computer where I have access to the BizTech Lab, so we have a ton of shapes in a folder here. 15 decorative snowflake shapes. I'm going to hit load, and these are CSH files. So if you have CSH, see all these are CSH? CSH files stands for custom shapes, and you can load those up and then they add them to your list. So when I hit load, now I have a bunch of snowflakes. And we're going to draw, let me control 0 a second so I can see. We're going to draw a snowflake and put it in the corner. I don't care which snowflake that you choose. I'm going to just choose the first one and draw it. The color doesn't matter because we're going to change it. So I'm going to draw a snowflake. You can see there's a lot of points. We probably don't want to mess with that. If we click off that layer, you won't see all those points anymore. But anyway, so we're going to draw that there in the corner. Let me show you this process in Photopea. So I'm about to replace that star. It's going to make me mad. In Photopea, same thing. Click and hold and get to your custom shape button. It's the same button. There is a place for custom shapes. When you click on it, there's a down arrow over here. So there's like the scroll bar, but then there's also a down arrow. And that's where you go to load the custom shapes here. So we would go to load custom shapes, and then you would go to the folder that you have downloaded your items, and you get that custom shape. So let me go to my Google Drive folder. I didn't queue this up ahead of time. I should have done that. My bad here. Okay, so this is Unit 3, and I have both a shape and I have a brush that we're going to use later. So I'm going to use my 15 decorative shapes. It's going to say load. It also says, hey, do you want to load this next time? It's up to you whether you want to say yes or not. I'm on a computer, so I'm going to say okay, but on a Chromebook, you might not have a lot of storage. Okay, now if I click and I scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's my snowflakes. So I'm going to click snowflake 1 once again, and then come down here, and I'm going to hold shift so that it makes a perfect snowflake, and pop it in the corner. There we go. There is that snowflake. Okay. So basically we've hit shapes pretty hard here. We know what format they need to be. If we wanted to make the shape prettier, we could still add all those layer styles like we've done in the past. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could get on my star layer, which is a polygon, and I could come down and hit my FX button, or if I'm in Photopea, the EFF button, and I could add, say, like a drop shadow here to this just to make it a little more pronounced so you can see it a little bit better, or maybe I want to back that down a little bit and hit OK. All right, and then I'll go do that same thing here in Photopea so we can see how that works. Click here. I don't have my screen down where you can see it, but there's my, I can't quite get to it from in here. Let me undock this. I love when things don't work exactly right. Okay, there we go. EFF, drop shadow, and then adjust that distance here. Funny, in my, so this is a problem. So let's go ahead and deal with it. So notice that my shapes got glued together. In Photopea, I have a star and I have a snowflake, and they're stuck together. Let's go to history, and I'm going to back out of that. This happens sometimes in Photoshop too. If you're clicked currently on a shape, sometimes it thinks you want to add to that shape. So if you draw another one, it kind of groups them together. So what I'm going to do, since I backed up in my history and undid, I'm just going to click on my background layer, and then I'm going to go back over in here and draw my snowflake again. Hopefully this time, oh, I'm sorry. Here's my problem. Look what I did. This is actually a good mistake because probably you would do this too. Up here where it says path, I need to make sure it says shape. When you draw, you are choosing whether to draw any shape as a path or as an actual filled in shape. So I didn't have it set on shape, so it added the path to the other layer. So I'm going to click this on shape. Again, I am on the background layer. I am on my snowflake. I'm going to click and drag, holding my shift key. And there we go. Things are better. I'm going to scoot this up here in my layer stack. Notice it does not name our shapes in Photopea, so if that was going to bother you, you could go ahead and name them just to keep track of which one is which. Okay. Next up, we went over that you can add layer styles. I'm going to go ahead, I think, and stop. We're at almost 15 minutes here on this first one. So if you're continuing to work, just stay with me and move on to the next video. If you're not, If you're on a computer, just save to your drive. If you're on a Chromebook, go ahead and save your file as a PSD and go ahead and download it just in case something should happen. You don't want to lose your work. On a computer, we can just save over the old copy. On a Chromebook, we're going to have to keep downloading it each time that we make changes. So at this point in time, let's save, and then we'll pick up in video 2 for this part of the unit.